In the early years of the 21st century, the Earth began to send clear signs that something was deeply wrong. At first, people noticed small changes: hotter summers, milder winters, strange weather in places that had never seen it before. But as the years passed, those small changes turned into big, frightening events. In 2020, wildfires burned across Australia like never before. Flames swallowed forests, homes, and towns. Over 1 billion animals died. Smoke from the fires circled the globe. Scientists said such fires were made worse by rising temperatures and long droughts, both linked to human activity. Not long after, in 2021, record heat hit the Pacific Northwest of the United States and Canada. Temperatures soared above 115-degree or 46-degree, a number once thought impossible for that part of the world. Roads melted. Power lines failed. Hundreds of people died in just a few days. Doctors and nurses worked around the clock, but many elderly and sick people could not survive the sudden extreme heat. Then came the floods. In 2022, Pakistan was hit by monsoon rains so heavy, they covered 1/3 of the country in water. 33 million people were affected. Homes, schools, and farms disappeared under muddy brown waves. The disaster was made far worse because glaciers in the Himalayas were melting faster due to global warming, adding more water to rivers already swollen by rain. At the same time, the oceans were changing. Coral reefs, colorful underwater cities full of fish and life, were turning white and dying. This bleaching happened when water got too warm. The Great Barrier Reef in Australia lost over half its coral in just 2 decades. Fish that once lived there vanished. Coastal communities that depended on fishing struggled to feed their families. Scientists had been warning about all of this for years. They studied ice cores, tree rings, ocean currents, and air samples. Their message was simple. Burning coal, oil, and gas was trapping heat in the atmosphere. Cutting down forests made it worse because trees absorb carbon dioxide, the main gas causing the problem. The more humans polluted, the more the planet heated up. Governments met often to talk about climate change. In Paris in 2015, nearly every country in the world agreed to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees C. They promised to cut emissions, use clean energy, and protect nature. But promises were not enough. After the meetings ended, many countries kept drilling for oil, building coal plants, and clearing forests for farms and mines. Global emissions kept rising. People tried to help in small ways. They recycled plastic, drove electric cars, and turned off lights to save energy. These actions mattered, but they were like drops in a bucket while a fire raged. The real power, the power to stop drilling, to protect rainforests, to shift entire economies, stayed in the hands of governments and big companies, and most of them chose profit over the planet. Meanwhile, the Earth kept reacting. In 2023, Canada faced its worst wildfire season in history. Smoke from the fires drifted all the way to New York City, turning the sky orange and making it hard to breathe. In Europe, rivers ran so low that nuclear power plants had to shut down because they needed cool water to operate. In Africa, droughts lasted longer, crops failed, and families walked miles just to find clean water. Scientists grew more urgent. They spoke not just of climate change, but of climate breakdown. They warned that the planet was nearing tipping points, moments when damage becomes unstoppable. For example, if the Greenland ice sheet melted completely, sea levels would rise by 20 feet, drowning coastal cities worldwide. If the Amazon rainforest dried out too much, it could turn from a lush forest into a dry savanna, releasing billions of tons of stored carbon into the air. Yet, life went on, as if nothing were wrong. Shopping malls stayed full, airplanes kept flying, factories kept pumping smoke into the sky. Many people felt helpless or distracted. Others refused to believe the science, calling it fear-mongering or a hoax. Social media filled with arguments while the real crisis deepened. But not everyone looked away. Around the world, ordinary people, especially young people, began to speak up. Students skipped school to protest outside government buildings. Farmers in India formed cooperatives to grow food without chemicals. Indigenous groups in the Amazon guarded their forests from illegal loggers. Fishermen in the Philippines rebuilt coral reefs by hand. These efforts were small, but they showed that another way was possible. Still, the big systems did not change. The world kept acting as if the Earth were an endless resource, not a living system with limits. It was like poking a sleeping bear and pretending it wouldn't wake up. By 2028, the signs were impossible to ignore. Heat records were broken every summer. Storms grew stronger and wetter. Animals disappeared faster than ever before. The oceans grew more acidic, making it hard for shellfish and plankton to survive, the very base of the marine food chain. And through it all, the earth remained quiet. Not with peace, but with patience. It did not shout. It did not curse. It simply responded as any living thing would to repeated harm. The wildfires, floods, droughts, and dying reefs were not punishments. They were consequences. Natural reactions to unnatural pressure. People called it Mother Nature, as if the planet were kind and forgiving. But nature is not a mother in the human sense. It does not forgive or forget. It balances. It corrects. And if pushed too far, it resets. No one knew it yet, but the Earth was about to stop being polite. In 2029, something began to change. Not in the weather, but in the way people listened. For years, scientists and activists had shouted warnings, but now a different voice was rising. It came from the oldest guardians of the land, indigenous communities from every corner of the Earth. In the Amazon rainforest, elders from the Yanomami, Kayapo, and Ashaninka nations gathered in a quiet village deep in the jungle. They did not come with charts or data, but with stories passed down for generations. They spoke of the forest as a living being, breathing, feeling, and remembering. "The trees are not just wood," said one elder. "They are our brothers. When you cut them without asking, you hurt the whole family." At the same time, in the Arctic, Inuit hunters noticed the ice forming later and melting sooner. Their dogs slipped on thin ice. Seals grew harder to find. "The land is confused," an elder woman told her grandchildren. "It used to know the rhythm of the seasons. Now it stumbles." In the Pacific Islands, where sea levels were rising fast, village leaders held meetings under banyan trees. They watched as saltwater poisoned their taro fields and waves ate away at their beaches. "We did not cause this fire," said a chief from Kiribati, "but we are the first to burn." These voices, once ignored or spoken over, began to connect. Through radio, satellite phones, and rare internet links, indigenous groups from the Amazon, the Arctic, the Sahara, and the Pacific started sharing their experiences. They realized they were all seeing the same thing. Nature was no longer just suffering, it was responding. In 2030, they held a meeting in Manaus, Brazil, near the heart of the Amazon. Over 200 representatives came, some by canoe, some by foot, some by small plane. They called themselves the guardians of the living earth. They did not ask for money or promises. They asked the world to stop pretending the earth was a machine to be used. While they met, strange things began to happen in places where nature had been pushed too far. In Iowa, a major corn-growing state in the U.S., millions of bees suddenly left industrial farms. Not just a few hives, entire regions went silent. Without bees, the crops could not grow. Farmers were shocked. Scientists tested the soil and air but found no poison. The bees had simply chosen to go. They moved to wildflower patches near old family farms that still used natural methods. In Indonesia, a river that had been choked with plastic waste for decades began to clean itself. Tiny microbes, never seen before in such numbers, appeared and started breaking down the plastic into harmless dust. Within months, fish returned. Children could swim again. No one knew where the microbes came from, but local elders said the river had remembered how to heal. In the Canadian boreal forest, loggers arrived one morning to find their machines buried under fast-growing vines and young trees. It had only been weeks since the area was cleared, yet the forest was already fighting back. Saplings grew inches in a single day. Birds nested in half-built logging roads. Workers refused to return, saying the forest felt angry. People called these events miracles or glitches in nature. But the Guardians said it was something else. "The earth has been polite," said a Maori leader from New Zealand. "It gave us time. It warned us with storms and heat. But now it is tired of waiting." News of these events spread slowly at first, then faster. A video of the self-cleaning river went viral. A photo of bees swarming around a single organic sunflower, while ignoring acres of pesticide-treated crops, was shared millions of times. Young people began asking, what if nature is not broken but awake? In cities, small groups formed. They planted gardens on rooftops, removed concrete to let grass grow, and stopped using plastic. In schools, children wrote letters to trees and held listening days in parks, sitting quietly to hear birds, wind, and water. It sounded silly to some, but others felt something shift inside them. Governments and big companies, however, were not impressed. They called the guardians dreamers and the strange events coincidences. Oil companies increased drilling. Mining firms pushed deeper into protected lands. "We cannot stop progress," said one CEO on television. "People need jobs. The economy must grow." But the Earth did not care about the economy. In early 2031, a strange quiet fell over industrial fishing zones in the North Atlantic. Sonar showed no fish, none at all. Yet just miles away, in marine protected areas where fishing was banned, fish swam in huge, healthy schools. It was as if the ocean had drawn a line. "You take from me without care, and I will give you nothing." Farmers in Europe reported that their soil, after years of chemicals, had turned lifeless. Seeds would not sprout, but on nearby farms that used compost and crop rotation, plants grew tall and strong. The difference was so clear, even skeptics had to wonder. The phrase, "we've been polite for too long," began appearing on walls, in songs, and on social media. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact, like saying, "I warned you." The Guardians did not claim to control these changes. They said they were only witnesses. "We do not command the bees or the rivers," explained a Navajo elder. "We listen." And now the Earth is speaking louder. By the end of 2031, more people were listening too, not because they were scared, but because they finally understood. The Earth was not a thing to own. It was a living system, and it had limits. Push it too far and it would push back. No one knew what would happen next. But one thing was clear. The age of pretending was ending. The Earth was done being polite. In the spring of 2032, the world held its breath. Leaders from nearly every country gathered in Geneva for a special emergency meeting at the United Nations. The agenda was simple: decide once and for all how to respond to the growing crisis of a planet in pain. Scientists, activists, and heads of state filled the Great Hall, but one voice was missing: the voice of the Earth itself. Or so they thought. The meeting began with speeches. Some leaders spoke of green technology and slow transitions. Others blamed poor nations for overpopulation. A few admitted failure, but most offered the same old promises: "We will act soon." Outside the building, thousands of people stood in silence, holding signs that read, "Listen," and "The Earth is not negotiable." Then, on the third day of the summit, everything changed. It started in the Pacific Ocean. Fishermen off the coast of Chile noticed a strange glow in the water at night. At first they thought it was pollution, but as the night deepened, the glow spread, north to Alaska, west to Japan, south to New Zealand. Satellites picked it up. The entire surface of the world's oceans was lighting up with soft blue light. Scientists rushed to explain it. They knew about bioluminescent algae, tiny sea creatures that glow when disturbed. But this was different. The glow wasn't random. It formed shapes, clear, sharp lines, letters. Within hours, images flooded news channels and phones everywhere. From space, the message was undeniable. Written across the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, and the Southern Sea, in glowing blue light were the words: "Stop attacking, or we stop pretending to be polite." The words appeared in English, Spanish, Mandarin, Arabic, Hindi, Swahili, Portuguese, Russian, and dozens more languages. Each ocean carried the message in the language of the nearest coast. It was not a trick. It was not a hack. Oceanographers confirmed the algae had arranged themselves in perfect patterns, something never seen in nature before. Panic spread through the UN building. Some leaders called it a hoax. Others fell silent. A few wept. Inside the hall, a young woman named Amara Okoye stepped up to the speaker's podium. She was only 22, but she represented a global network of youth climate groups from Lagos to Jakarta. She had lost her home to floods in Nigeria when she was 16. Since then, she had traveled the world, listening to farmers, fishers, and elders. She looked out at the room full of powerful people and spoke in a calm, clear voice. "For years we told you the ice was melting. You said, 'Not in my lifetime.' We told you the air was getting dirty. You said, 'We need more cars.' We told you the forests were dying. You said, 'We need more paper.' Now the Earth is speaking for itself. Not through us, not through scientists, through the oceans, the winds, the soil. It's not angry. It's just done pretending. You call this a miracle or a warning. But it's neither. It's a choice. Stop attacking, stop burning, cutting, poisoning, or the Earth will stop being kind." Her words echoed in the silent room. Outside, the crowds grew still. Even the birds seemed to pause. Back in labs and control rooms, scientists scrambled for answers. How could algae form words? How could it happen in every ocean at once? The more they studied it, the less it made sense by old rules. One marine biologist whispered, "It's like the planet has a mind of its own." Social media exploded. Some called it divine. Others called it nature's last cry. But millions, especially young people, saw it as proof. Proof that the Earth was alive. Proof that it had been patient. And proof that patience had run out. In Tokyo, students walked out of schools and formed human chains around parks. In Berlin, workers shut down a coal plant by sitting in front of its gates. In São Paulo, families tore up their lawns and planted food gardens. The message in the ocean had done what years of protests could not. It made people believe that change was not just needed. It was already happening, yet not everyone listened. That same night, a powerful oil company in Texas announced it would begin drilling in a protected Arctic zone. "Nature doesn't send messages," their CEO said on live TV. "People do, and this is fear propaganda." But the Earth did not argue. It simply acted. 2 days later, a sudden storm, small but fierce, blew through the Arctic drilling site. Not a hurricane, not a blizzard. Just a sharp cold wind that knocked over equipment, froze pipes, and scared away workers. No one was hurt, but the project was delayed. Again and again, every time they tried to restart, something small went wrong. A broken cable, a lost permit, a whale swimming too close to block ships. Locals said the ocean was guarding itself. Back in Geneva, the UN summit ended without a formal agreement. Too many leaders were afraid of losing money or power, but something deeper had shifted. Ambassadors returned home changed. Some began quietly canceling fossil fuel deals. Others met with indigenous leaders for the first time, not as guests but as teachers. Amara did not go back to her apartment. She traveled to a small island in the Philippines, where elders had been rebuilding coral reefs by hand. There she sat on the beach and watched the water. It was calm now. The blue glow was gone, but she knew the message remained. The Earth had spoken, not with fire or flood, but with light, with beauty, with clarity. And now the world had to answer. After the message in the ocean, the world waited. Many hoped the Earth would give more signs, more warnings, more chances. But this time there were no more warnings. The politeness was over. In early 2033, nature stopped being gentle. It did not destroy everything at once. It did not punish everyone equally. Instead, it began to correct, quietly, firmly, and with clear purpose. First, the bees disappeared from industrial farms. Not just a few hives, but all of them. Across the United States, Canada, and Europe, vast fields of corn, soy, and wheat stood empty of pollinators. Without bees, fruits and vegetables failed to grow. Supermarkets saw prices rise. Apples, almonds, berries, once common, became rare. But in small gardens, on rooftops, and in villages that grew food without chemicals, bees still buzzed happily. It was as if nature was saying, "If you poison me, I will not serve you. But if you care for me, I will feed you." Next, the oceans changed. In ports where oil tankers and cargo ships dumped waste, strange microbes appeared. These tiny life forms ate plastic, oil, and even old tires. But they also clogged engines and ruined fuel lines. Ships broke down. Deliveries were delayed. Yet in fishing villages that used small boats and clean nets, the sea stayed calm and full of fish. Again, the pattern was clear. Harm brought trouble. Care brought help. Then came the forests. In places where trees had been cut down for palm oil or cattle ranches, the land refused to cooperate. Rain would not fall. Soil turned to dust. Seeds would not sprout. But in areas where people planted native trees, protected old growth, or let land rest, forests grew back faster than anyone expected. Birds returned. Rivers ran clean. Animals came home. The Earth was not attacking people. It was attacking the systems that hurt it. Cities felt it too. In 2034, coastal areas that had built luxury resorts and oil refineries on wetlands were hit by blue floods. These were not normal storms. The water rose only around factories, highways, and shopping centers built on stolen land. Nearby neighborhoods with community gardens, rainwater tanks, and solar panels stayed dry. Scientists could not explain it, but elders said, "The water knows where it is welcome." At the same time, something strange happened with plastic. In landfills and rivers, a new kind of mold began to grow. It broke down plastic bottles, bags, and packaging into harmless dust within weeks. But it only worked on waste that had been abandoned, never on items still in use. A child's toy was safe. A soda bottle tossed on the street vanished in days. Again, it felt like a choice, not a random event. People began to notice a pattern. The Earth was not punishing humans. It was protecting life. Communities that lived simply, shared resources, and respected nature found things getting easier. Food grew better. Water stayed clean. Air felt fresh. But places that kept drilling, dumping, and wasting faced one problem after another. Broken machines, failed crops, sick animals. Not everyone accepted this. Big companies called it bad luck or economic cycles. They hired scientists to say it was all coincidence. They blamed the weather, politics, or even eco-terrorists. Some governments sent police to stop people from tearing up concrete or planting trees in empty lots. But the movement grew anyway. In Detroit, a group of neighbors turned an old parking lot into a food forest. Within a year, they were feeding 200 families. In Nairobi, women built compost toilets and rainwater systems that kept their homes clean during droughts. In Norway, fishermen gave up big nets and returned to old ways that let fish populations recover. A new idea spread, the Politeness Pact. It was not a law or a treaty. It was a promise people made to each other and to the earth. They promised to take only what they needed, waste nothing, and give back whenever they could. They shared seeds, repaired clothes, walked instead of driving, and taught children to thank the trees and rivers. Schools changed too. Instead of only teaching math and history, they added earth care classes. Children learned how to grow food, read weather signs, and listen to birds. They were told, "You are not owners of the earth, you are guests. Act like it." Of course, there was fear. Some people hoarded food and fuel, thinking the worst was coming. Others joined armed groups that claimed to protect progress by force. Tensions rose. In a few places, fights broke out between those who wanted to change and those who refused. But the earth did not take sides. It simply continued its work. In the summer of 2034, a heat wave hit Europe again. But this time, cities with green roofs, tree-lined streets, and community gardens stayed cool. People gathered in parks to share water and stories. In cities with only concrete and cars, hospitals overflowed. The difference was not money. It was respect. By the end of the year, more than 50 countries had banned new oil drilling. Hundreds of towns had removed asphalt to plant trees. Millions of people had joined the Politeness Pact, not because they were forced, but because they saw it worked. The earth had not forgiven the past. But it was giving a chance for a new future, and this time many were ready to accept it. By 2035, the world looked different. Not perfect, not healed, but changed. The old way of living, burning, cutting, wasting, was fading. A new way was growing, quietly but surely, like grass through cracks in concrete. It started with a vote. In early 2035, over 120 countries held public referendums on a simple question: should nature have rights? People said yes. Not just a few, but millions: farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, children. They voted to give rivers, forests, oceans, and animals the same legal protection as people. It meant a company could not dump poison in a river without facing the same charges as if it hurt a human. It meant cutting down an ancient forest was no longer development, it was harm. This became known as the Earth Accord. It was not signed in a fancy room by leaders in suits. It was built by mothers planting gardens, students cleaning beaches, and elders sharing stories. The Accord did not promise to fix everything overnight. It promised to stop making things worse and to start listening. Cities changed first. Streets once filled with cars now had bike lanes, trees, and small farms. Rooftops grew food. Rainwater was collected in barrels. Old shopping malls became community centers with libraries, clinics, and seat exchanges. People walked more. They talked more. They knew their neighbors' names. In the countryside, farms looked different too. Instead of endless rows of one crop soaked in chemicals, fields were mixed: corn with beans, fruit trees with vegetables, chickens with herbs. This old way, called agroecology, brought back insects, birds, and healthy soil. Farmers earned less money, but they ate better, breathed cleaner air, and slept easier at night. Indigenous communities, long ignored, became guides. In Canada, First Nations led forest restoration. In Brazil, the Amazon was returned to its original guardians. In Australia, Aboriginal firekeepers used ancient methods to prevent wildfires. The world finally understood. These people were not backward. They were wise. Amara Okoye, once a young protester from Nigeria, now worked with the United Nations, but not in a tall office building. She traveled by train, boat, and foot to places where people were rebuilding life with the earth. She listened more than she spoke. Her title was Earth Ambassador, but she preferred to be called a student of the land. One warm morning in 2036, she stood on a beach in Lagos. 10 years earlier, this shore had been covered in plastic, oil stains, and trash. Now clean waves rolled in. Mangrove trees, once cut down for firewood, had been replanted by local children. Their roots held the soil and gave shelter to fish. Dolphins had returned. You could hear them clicking in the distance. Nearby, a group of kids dug small holes in the sand and placed young coconut trees inside. Their teacher, a woman who had once worked in a factory, smiled as she watched. "They think they are planting trees," she told Amara. "But really, they are planting hope." Amara nodded. She remembered the fear of her childhood, the floods, the hunger, the feeling that no one cared. Now she saw something new, calm, not because all problems were gone, but because people had stopped fighting the earth and started working with it. Not every country had changed. Some still burned coal, some still cut forests, but they were becoming islands of the old world, surrounded by a sea of new thinking. Their people grew tired of sickness, heat, and empty shelves. Slowly, even they began to shift. The biggest change was not in laws or technology, it was in hearts. People no longer saw nature as something out there to use. They saw it as part of themselves. When a bird sang, they listened. When rain fell, they gave thanks. When they took food from the soil, they left something in return. A song, a seed, a moment of silence. Schools taught this new story. Not the story of humans conquering nature, but of humans belonging to it. Children learned that a tree is not just wood, it is air, shelter, memory. That a river is not just water, it is life, history, future, and the earth. It did not shout. It did not punish. It simply responded. Rain fell where it was needed. Bees returned to gardens that welcomed them. Fish swam in rivers that were clean. The air smelled of earth and flowers, not smoke and chemicals. There were still hard days. Storms still came, droughts still happened. But communities were ready. They stored food, shared water, and helped each other. They knew they were not alone, and neither was the planet. One evening, as the sun set over the Atlantic, Amara sat on the beach with an old Yoruba elder. They watched the waves roll in, steady and strong. "Do you think it forgave us?" Amara asked softly. The elder smiled. "The earth does not forgive like people do. It does not hold grudges. It only balances. We broke the balance. Now we are learning to walk gently again." Amara looked at the water. It was calm, clear, alive. She thought of the message that once glowed across the oceans. Stop attacking, or we stop pretending to be polite. The earth had not destroyed them. It had given them a chance, and this time, humanity was trying, really trying, to be worthy of it. A gentle rain began to fall, not a storm, not a flood, but a soft, steady rain that soaked the new trees, filled the clean rivers, and whispered to the soil, "We are still here together."